Good morning. Welcome to a New Day Fellowship Church morning service, 8 o'clock. And so we're so glad that you have tuned in. We are moving into 2025, and we know that change is inevitable. Boy, have we seen it in the last week. And so we want to make sure that as we go into 2025 as Christians, we want to be equipped in change. And many of you may say, I see change all the time, so I know how to go through change when it occurs. But hopefully today that we can share what change is and actually use an example. Pastor Beamon began to talk a little bit about change on last Sunday, and I thought that I would bring it to in a teaching session so that we can actually see what he was talking about, the life cycle of change. And we'll go to the next slide. Of a butterfly is fascinating process. And even as he began to talk about it on last Sunday, I began to research even more as far as what the four main stages are with a butterfly. One of the key words that I'll talk about throughout this morning is metamorphosis, defined. Change of a physical form or structure. A substance, especially supernatural, means the metamorphosis of humans even into animals. It's a striking alteration in appearance, character, or circumstances. So we know that if you're going through metamorphosis, you are changing structurally, you are changing, and in some cases from a process that you were in the beginning that maybe no one could even recognize in the ending of the change. The next slide is just a picture that shows the different stages that I'm going to be talking about briefly: the egg, the caterpillar, chrysalis, and the adult emerging of the butterfly. The first phase is the egg. And I'm going to break it down in a Christian format shortly, but let's just begin to think about the first stage begins when a female butterfly lays an egg, usually on the leaves of a host plant. These eggs are often tiny and can vary in color and shape depending on the species. Now, I highlighted the color piece because in the spirit realm, I was just thinking the diversity of even us as Christians. We know it says these eggs are often tiny and can vary in color and shape. Every time I walk into the mall or to HEB, I think I see different colors and different shapes. And so it was just even interesting to me as the eggs were being birthed that there were already different colors and different shapes. Then we go to the larva, the caterpillar. Once the eggs hatch, the larvae emerge as caterpillars. This is a crucial growth stage where the caterpillar feeds ferociously on the leaves. So it's growing rapidly. It's getting everything that it needs as it's getting ready to go through this change. Then we're talking about the stage of chrysalis. As far as after the caterpillar has reached its full size, it enters the pupal stage, forming a protective casing all around it. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as a Christian. What is that protective stage as it goes through the change? And lastly, the adult butterfly. Now, finally, the mature butterfly emerges from that from the egg to the larva to the caterpillar. That's a mouth twister there, as well as going through the beautiful stage of the butterfly. Initially, its wings are crumpled and wet, but they soon expand and dry. And I was sharing this with Pastor Beamon even on last Sunday after he started talking about the change, was I even saw when it said, its wings are crumpled and wet, and they soon expand and dry. I said that is the phase of the baptism. You know, it was dry, it goes under this wet stage, and then it comes up, allowing the butterfly to take flight. You know, and I could just see someone that possibly was ready to serve their life as Christ, and they go under, then they come up, and they're ready to fly. So now we are in the stage, the final stage of transformation. As we go to the next page, it talks about constant change. And one of the things that I was very surprised about is, and maybe I'll ask the question, of course, many of you have the outline as far as the lifespan of a butterfly. Did any of you all know how quickly through those stages, how long the butterfly lives? Did you all know that? I was actually shocked that how long do butterflies live? And after they go through the life cycle, it says that they actually, it's about what? 13 weeks? I'm sorry, 13 months. 12 weeks to 13 months is the lifespan. And I was actually shocked. I thought that when we saw butterflies flying around, that they were here forever. But they actually have a life cycle from 12 weeks, it says, until 13 months. So let's take that from talking about the life cycle of a butterfly to the Christian world. How many of you all, and I'll just ask this question to the ones that are here this morning, how many of you all have experienced change? How many of you all experience change every day? And it is actually a time for us to remember that change is inevitable, no matter how we look at it. And I know that this, in 8 o'clock service, we do participate. Could someone tell me or read to me, if you have the outline or look on the board, our favorite scripture, and we have it here, change is inevitable. Micah, what are we talking about straight from the Bible? Ecclesiastes 3:1-8 says,
To everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven.
Listen to that deep voice, I tell you. It sounds like a television voice. Yes, to everything there is a season and a time for every matter. Now the next slide says God's sovereignty. Sister Lynette, what does it say about God's sovereignty?
It says that the Bible teaches that God is in control of all changes in life.
Oh my God. Well, what are we nervous about? It is saying here that God is in control of all changes in life. And as I look here at the picture, what is in his hands? A baby. Just a precious baby. And do you know, and many times I think as mothers, we can, and even you probably have seen a mother holding a child, and that baby looks like they are perfectly fine. That they don't have, look, they don't know about the light bill. They don't know about it's storming outside. They don't know about the tornado that's getting ready to hit. Because what? That baby is in the palm of the mother's hand. And really, that is how God has us. When things are very chaotic, he reminds us that he is in control. No matter what it looks like to the right or to the left, he is in control. Faith in times of change. I know that if I did not have faith in God, there would be times that I would be nervous. But throughout the Bible, believers are encouraged to trust in God during periods of change. One of my favorite scriptures that we talk about often is trusting in God. Proverbs 3:5-6 says, Trust in the Lord with all of your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. And always acknowledge him, and he will straighten your paths. This implies that faith can guide us through uncertain times. And a favorite word that we talk about often is hope. Hope in change. Change can also be a source of hope. In Jeremiah 29 and 11, it says, God reassures his people, saying, For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. This verse reminds us that even amidst change, God has a purpose and plan for our lives. And then the very last discussion, it says, in summary, the Bible presents change as an integral part of life that can lead to growth, transformation, and new beginnings. Change encourage believers to trust in God. So we're going to thank you, Tina, for sharing those slides to the audience so that they could have something to visualize as we are talking about change. Now, this part, I am going to really talk to the audience that's here, not online. Of course, you can put it in the chat box as far as change and going back to our very first word, metamorphosis. We know that as Christians, we go through change. This change can often include a shift in perspective, values, and behavior as they embrace their faith. So I'm asking any of you, what have you gone through in the last week that you have said, oh my God, this is really a big change in my life? Could someone just give me an example?
I wouldn't. Well, I guess I wouldn't say in the last week, but I know this week we had a conference at work where we talked about this very subject. We talked about change and how we support. You have to change the way you work. You have to change the way you think, and just how as leaders we support people doing the change. And I mentioned after that, we kind of had a debriefing of what people thought. And I thought about how when I first started working, how when you work, it wasn't, I mean, you did what you were told. They have a thing now where you have to tell, the staff the why behind what they're doing to help them understand. And I just mentioned to them how things have evolved and changed in the workforce. That before, you were just told what to do. The expectation is you did it without all of the explanation about why you were doing it. You were doing it because you were asked to do it. Now, the flow is helping the staff understand why they're doing it and supporting them emotionally during the change. And so for people that, the generation gap, that can be a little difficult to embrace the fact that we have to support people with doing a job that they're being paid to do. If that makes sense. So it's just is different than what it used to be. And so my comment was, we're focusing on how we support the staff, but also how will the leader be supported? And so when you bring that around to being a believer, as you support other believers, you have to also have a sense of support for change as well. And so I don't know. That was just something, to think about this past week when it talking about staff. It's just how the workforce itself has changed.
Like that?
This is something that I kind of noticed this year, but I feel like I've been reminded this week. So, how my industry operates is off of contract. So, the person who replaced me at my last station, their contract is ending in June, and they're already looking for jobs. They're stressing, and usually we don't do that till like 2-3 months in advance because no one's going to wait on you that long to pack up your belongings. And they're like, "Oh, I need to do this. I need to do this. I need to." Now I'm like, I'm telling them to calm down. It'll work itself out. You're just stressing yourself out by looking so early. And I've noticed that change. I'm not about to stress because one, I'm too tired for that. Two, it's up to God. But this is probably a two-parter. I do have a question, and everyone feel free to answer. But I always do wonder this: how do you know when you're relying on God versus being lazy? So you know you have to work for stuff. You don't want to just like, oh my goodness, I want a car. I'm gonna just lay on my bed all day and never go to work and expect God. But like, how do you balance that? I don't know if that's even a question people can answer.
I just ask God, is it something I need to be doing? I mean, yes, I'm trusting that, God will guide me in whatever I'm asking for. But at the same time, sometimes there are things that we can be doing. It's just like, I want a job. Well, we're believing God to help us with a job, but we do have to fill out the application. I mean, you know what I mean? So I would say just ask God, just say, hey, if it's something that I should be doing, I cannot do the things that. So that's what I say.
And I do, believe even when we were talking about the life cycle of change, Micah, that when we put it to the Bible, there's the faith, the faith walk. And we know that to have a faith walk, it's not just lying in the bed, but you have to get up, as Sister Lynette said, and you have to have movement to that faith walk. Because if you don't have movement, how are we able to show God that we are trusting in Him? It's just like standing there and say, yes, God, I trust you, but I'm not making one step. Well, God is saying, if you trust me, make the first step. Okay, mandatory staff meeting with my staff and, talking again about change. And one of the things that we talked a lot about is during the time of change, we may bend, but we're not going to break. Stability, but that doesn't mean we're going to break because it goes back to the very beginning of the presentation talking about God has us. Take the first step. And I'm sure many of you have heard about the little story where there was a storm coming and the rain was beginning to pour, and the young lady began to cry out to the Lord that she needed help because the rain was coming high, high, high into the house and flooded over with water. She asked God at the end, where were you during the time of this rainfall, the storm? God says, I sent 5 different ways for you to get out of the house. A plane, a car, all kinds of ways. But you did not trust me to know that I was sending you a way out. And many times throughout life, even in my experience, I have seen God send me a way out. But sometimes as Christians, Micah, we turn our heads, oh, that couldn't be God. I know that's not God. And God is saying, well, I have been able to see a way out through a child. A young child may come up to you and say, Micah, it's time to change. And you're saying, that 3-year-old don't know anything. But yet and still, 3 months later, you're saying, you know what? When little Susie Q was telling me that I needed to change, that really was a message to me. And I have to share with you all throughout day to day, I look for ways that God is speaking to me. You hear what I'm saying? I mean, it could be an email. It could be a sign on the road. Someone in a meeting, somebody may say one word. And actually, the word bend but not break was said in a meeting this week. And I wrote it down because I caught on to it. And I said, during these unprecedented times, I have to know that I may bend, may feel a little uncomfortable, but I'm not going to break. Why? Because I am a child of God. Anyone else want to talk about change? We know that in our Christian life, there is growth and development. And Michael, you said something interesting as far as how we adapt to change in different situations or even through different lifespan. We talked about the butterfly. I think about 20, 30 years ago, and Sister Lynette talks about this often. One situation you may have reacted a certain way 30 years ago. But in this time frame, today, January 26, 2025, like you said, Micah, you said, I'm not going to stress out over that because I have seen so much that it too shall pass. But 20 years ago, when you were only 3 years old, Micah, you may have acted differently, because you didn't have the growth and the development. But now, because you have gone through so many different things in life, the life cycle really, that you are able to handle it and respond in a different way. I know this week in another situation that an employee had sent an email that probably wasn't appropriate. And so whoever the email went to, they were not very happy with the email. And so one of the first things I said, you have to realize this very same email, and you all can relate, could have gone out 6 months ago, and that person would have said, oh, okay. But because of the environment, the stress, and everything that's happening today, they're ready to cut you into little pieces and throw you in the trash can. And so we always have to remember that depending on the situation, the environment of what is happening, many times people react differently. And so that is why and I believe that as we talked about the life cycle of the butterfly, remember after that egg, there's a hard casing around it. And I call it the protection. And I believe that God gives us that protection. As new Christians, God, He protects us, even as older Christians. When people come after us, God gives that protection that we may need. And many times we have to depend on God, knowing that covering is always there. Sister Lynette talked about now we are always having to tell the employee the why. And that is so true. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, your supervisor came and said, today you are moving to this office. Guess what, Micah? You start packing. You didn't question, you got your stuff, and you moved. But 2025, fast forward, Micah, today I want you to move from this office to this office. No, wait a minute. I've been here 3.5 weeks, and you're telling me to move? Not 3.5 years, 3.5 weeks. You know what I'm talking about, Sister Lynette. Already having an attitude because you're asked to move. And, even as a leader, you're saying, where is this coming from? In 2025, do you think some of it that maybe we have created this environment as far as entitlement? Where is it coming from? Because, again, 20 years ago, it was more or less the leader may say, this is what we're going to do, and not really as a dictator. It was really more out of respect of the position. If my leader is saying, this is what I need to do, you are entrusting that they have thought it through, came up with a plan, and they're going to give you the reason why. Yes, ma'am.
Just know that we are seeing this in a lot of different industries. I mean, it's definitely a lack of trust. Whether it's trust in government, trust in adults, and of course, I deal with children. And children that have been involved in trauma. And so when you have children that have been involved in trauma, a lot of times they don't trust the adults that they're around. They're very quick to say, why do I have to go? Like, that's the first reason that they will ask if they're called to the office or anything like that. So as I'm listening to you, I'm thinking about the changes that have even happened in the education system where we have, and you know, you don't want to call them entitled, but just what you said a few minutes ago, I've had a lot of conversations with students where I'm like, I just need you to respect the position. And they don't seem to understand that part. And so that's something that we kind of have to help them with. But I do wonder if maybe our generation caused this also, just like you said.
Absolutely. And I agree with you 100%, Tina, that in the educational world, healthcare, I mean, we could begin to name many police force. I mean, there are so many different jobs that I know that if we had a representation here, that they would say, "Oh my goodness, I can tell you how things have changed, you know, over the years." But Tina, you said the key word respect. Respect. Do you feel in 2025 that we've lost some respect just day to day? Because I even think about the elderly. And of course, we have to remember many of us grew up in different households, different environments, different rules. But how many of you all were even raised to say yes, sir, and yes, ma'am? I mean, that was just a part of my life. If somebody was older than I, especially, you know, as a teenager, and there was an adult at church and gave me a task to do, Sister Lynette, I said, yes, ma'am. But in this day and time, they may look at you like you're, and you know, they may say something like, you're not my mother, or maybe in a different way. And you're saying, well, I may not be your parent, but it's called respect. It's called respect. And you know, Mike, I know you work in the environment of the news, and I'm sure you all hear many, many things throughout the day. But how do you feel respect is, even in your workplace?
Okay, so there's many ways I can go about this because my job, you get external stuff, you get internal stuff. I feel like as a community as a whole, since I get an oversight, I feel like there's a lack of just for a lack of honestly regard for other people. Um, Yesterday was National Message Micah Day, so I got a lot of messages, which I'm okay with. I kind of signed up for that, but you know, my off days I try to relax. But from a person weaving in and out of traffic, you know, crashing and killing themselves, that's a lack of respect for honestly yourself and other drivers on the road. Why would you do that? So I feel like there's a lot of lack of respect internally. Sometimes I notice two people do this, which how I was raised, we just don't do this. I'm one of the first people at work. I say good morning when I come in and see my coworkers. Okay, you know, I'm coming in at 3 a.m. My coworkers been there since midnight. Then you get to about 8:30. There's about two people who just come down, sit down, no word. I'm like, oh, where they do that at? So that to me is a lack of respect for other people. So I can go on and on because I see a whole lot, but I'm gonna keep it there.
Thank you so much, Micah. And that is so true. And I have to go back to that word good morning because we say this all the time, and I have seen it written as well. It does not cost you anything to speak. The last time I checked, you can walk onto your workplace any time of the day, and it's not going to cost you anything for you just to say hello, good morning. Just recently, I have told this story many times over the last couple of weeks because it really humbled me as far as what are we doing as far as respect to everybody. I am the type of person that no matter what job position you have, you are a human being. I stepped onto the elevator and there was a housekeeper on the elevator. And I said, "Good morning. How are you? This is such a wonderful day." And Sister Lynette, he looked at me in shock. And he said, "Are you speaking to me?" Now, of course, I looked around because I was thinking, well, maybe there's someone else behind. I said, "Yes, sir. I'm speaking to you." And he saw my badge as far as a leader, and he says, "People like you never speak to me." Oh my God. It brought me to my knees. And I said, "Sir, you are the most important person in this organization." Because, first of all, in healthcare, if the place not clean, how many of you all would go to a hospital that there was trash? You walk in the door, there's trash in the floor, McDonald cups everywhere, bugs everywhere. I think most of us would say, "Not here," and go right on out the door. So I said, if you were not here and your team, we would not even be in operation. And at that time, I told this young man, I said, "I apologize that if you feel like people of leadership do not even take the time to speak to you." And Sister Lynette, I was getting ready to start a work group just on cultural change that following week. And you know who I made sure was at the table? Housekeeping. I said, by golly, I said, I want housekeeping, I want dietary, I want people that feel like, who am I? But this is what I felt like at that time. I said, where have we, or what have we done over the years to make people really feel like they're not important in every job? Even when I go to McDonald's, the drive-through, I always try to find something great to say to that person. Because first of all, I want my food to come out right. Okay? And so I always tease Christine. I said, "Don't fight with the people at the window. Don't say that you didn't give me my ketchup and you didn't do this and you didn't do that." I said, "Because you may get something else." So if the order is messed up, Micah, I just, if it's not messed up really bad, but if it's messed up, it's okay. Maybe I can just live without the cheese this time. Go ahead, Micah.
I also want to say, I guess, yeah, entitlement. You just brought that up.
Yes.
When you were thinking that, I feel like we have a lot of entitlement now. Speaking of my job, boy, one thing I learned is everyone has an opinion. I always say this quote, I used it one time, but thousands of people are going to see you, so there's going to be thousands of opinions of you, from how you talk, how you dress, to what you said, to what you covered. Someone's going to have something negative to say, and you know what is crazy? The people who will actually sit down, take the time, instead of picking up the remote, and I'll say this publicly, instead of picking up the remote, changing the channel, you felt the need to come up to me, to write to me, that you didn't like this, you didn't like that. Okay, well, there's about 3 other stations you can look at, 2 other ones in the morning. But I just feel like that's just crazy how people will just come up to you now, or just like write something so rude and vile to you. And it's like,
Yes.
I'm a human, I'm a real person, I got a family. Now, come on now. So I think that's yeah, a lack of respect and just entitlement. And you just can go about your day. You don't even realize what you may have done to someone who's not. I mean, I'm pretty. You ain't gonna hurt my feelings. I used to work with kids, but still, for someone who's not as strong as me, yeah, that ain't right.
And as you're handing the mic over, there's a little video that has been circling on Facebook of a little boy that his mother is putting Vaseline all over his face. Have you seen it? And I have watched that video over and over again. And he's actually telling people. He said, "I know you all have experienced this, where your mom just saturate your face with Vaseline." And he said, "I just look a mess. I just look at me. I just look a mess." And so he is telling everyone, how he looks, and his little face is shiny, but Micah, you are so right as far as Everybody has an opinion. And then many of us, maybe not all of us, may see on Facebook that you'll see like that little video or many videos. And the first place you go to is what? The comments. And by the time you read the first five, you say, really? Now, where did they get that from? Why are they are going way left. And then sometimes you'll even see in the comments someone will say, now y'all just doing too much. That is just being too negative on just this one small video. But go ahead, Sister Lynette.
I was gonna say I also noticed a change in mental health. We have, yes, have had an increased awareness of mental health and the focus on, mindfulness and mental health. But I have just noticed that coping, when it comes to change, it could be a simple change. But if you are dealing with anxiety or different things, personally, that simple change, people will take that and turn it into a whole different scenario, all based off of their mental status at the time. And so also the coping, being able to cope with change, because one of the things we talked about, in that seminar is, when you think of change, what affects you. And the one thing I talked about was the frequency of change, because change does not happen A, then B, then C. It happens. You could have change in your personal life, then you go to the job, then you have change there, then change in your health. It just happens all at once. But I feel like as a believer, when we are working to support people, we cannot gloss over the mental health part of it, how people are coping, and where their source of strength comes from. Because as a believer, we know that God has control over everything and we're going to be taken care of. But we also have to factor in that other person and where their sense of strength comes from in their mental health.
Amen. Amen. And as you were saying that, I was thinking in the classroom setting, and I'm sure Tina, you can see this as well. Many times as you look in any audience, really, but as you look out into, if you're teaching to someone, even the engagement, you'll see someone that they look just completely out of it. You may see someone, maybe they're engaged and they're shaking their head. Then you'll see someone else, they're not even part of the conversation, And so you just look across the audience, and it reminds me of a young lady that came to class late the first week of school every day, late 30 minutes, one time an hour. And so I finally, by the end of the week, I said it's first week of school. I don't know what the person's going through, was not going to be very strict. And so at the end of the week, I asked her, I said, I noticed that you've been late every day. I just wanted to be a support and see, is there something I can help you with? And she began to cry. And she said, I've been sleeping in my car. And I thought I was going to be able to get some emergency space as far as the housing here at the school. But she said, I gave my housing check to my parents because they were getting ready to lose their home. So therefore, I didn't want to see my mom out in the cold. So I've been sleeping in my car. Oh my God. You're talking about completely melt down. Immediately I was thinking that she can come to my house. How can I do this? I was just thinking. And then, of course, the Holy Ghost said, okay, let's take this to the dean and let's see what we can do quickly. And thank God that the dean had a very soft Christian heart and immediately called the provost. Things started happening. That kid had a place by that afternoon. But just think, Sister Lynette, if we are not sensitive to human beings, and I think we have said that word multiple times. You know, Sister Georgia is a human being. She's not a number. You know, I know she has a house with a number on it, but I know that Sister Georgia lives in that house. I know her heart. I know what she will do. And many times I think where we are going, even in this lifetime, we do not even see people as human beings anymore. And the first thing, Micah, they don't know where you came from. They don't know what it took for you to even get where you are today. Because many times, you know, people will say, well, look at Micah. He just think he's something. Look at him on TV every morning. You know, they just, you know, look, just, Micah, if they knew what it took for you to get from point A to point B to point C, and even here in Temple, Texas, they would take a step back and say, oh my God, let me keep my opinion to myself because of all what it took. And so many times I think throughout our lifespan, we need to be sensitive to where people, where they came from, what they've been through in the past and even currently. Like Sister Lynette said, sometimes you could have something going on in your health at the same time that you have something going on in your job, many things in your family, and people do not realize what is happening to you. Just even this past week, as we've been talking about change, we were talking about many, many different avenues as far as what's happening. And I had a staff member just cry in my arms. Saying, people do not even know. And I began to shed tears as well, because that is so true. If people only knew some of the things that each and every one of us are experiencing each and every day, I think we would have a different attitude on how we treat people. One of the, someone gave me a little phrase maybe about a year ago, and I keep it now right on my computer. And it says, the load you carry it well. No one knows the heaviness of that load, and you carry it well. We may come into church each and every Sunday, and we would have brushed our hair, put on clothes, and people will say, now, you know, they look great today. But oh my God, we are carrying it well, but they have no idea the heaviness of that load. So that is when we go back to really being realistic of what people truly can be going through from day to day, because we are living in unprecedented times where we see change, and it is inevitable. I heard someone even say again this week in his sociology class, he said he remembered the one thing that we can rest assured is change. That's not going to change, because we know that you can walk out of this building and something in your life or something personal could change. So, as we close this morning, I want you to know that we will continue to talk about change, but as Christians, what we are, just as we've talked about the life cycle of the butterfly this morning, I want us to remember that as Christians, we do have to know that God has us in the palm of his hands. We have to know that there is a casing around us that's protecting us. And really, as we fondly go through the life cycle and we know that God has our back, we have to be able to take others along with us and let them know that God truly, truly is our source. He is our source. And we have to trust in Him and Him alone, because some of us may look totally different next week than we even look today. That's how quickly change can happen. But in the meantime, we have to know who our source is. Thank you all for being a part of this lesson on the life cycle of change, from a butterfly to utilizing the metamorphosis of what it means in our Christian life. We have to know that in every season, we know that there's a time for everything. And what we will do in our Christian walk is continue to put God first. Thank you for joining us this morning, and may you have a blessed